Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 18th of April. It's tax day. Big excitement with that. I hope everyone had a good Friday. It was off because it was a typical Easter break for everyone, and the markets are going to resume, of course, after that decent fall-off action. And again, we're pretty much just back and forth within this, and it was pretty straightforward for us. Above 44.25 there, slight bias to the upside, even though we were in pretty weak readings. We had the crossover of magenta, but once the day began, we got to that 61. It had already faded below. We still have the declining orange. If that picks up, then I would expect that we're going to break down and really cross below the 50% and then some. Otherwise, potential for a bit more positive here because we've gone from below the red line to above, even on the declining day, and you've reached that oversold level on DOC where we tend to get some kind of pushback, whether it will be sustainable or not. Now, this is in the midst of complete drawdown here from the MBI as well as DOC readings, and we had that rollover of the gold here on the shakeout. So a lot of negative items, and that's all been clear since we broke down, right here after we got to the MBI magenta below the 33 level right there. And it's pretty much stayed that way until we just crossed above the yellow, which was the earliest sign of any kind of improvement. And not unsurprising. I mean, there's a lot of macro issues. The fact that we're this high, close to the all-time highs, is impressive given some of the warning signs that we see out there. And it's just a question of how long of a divergence you have. I mean, even in 07 and that, we had the bond market signaling danger long before the markets rolled over. It was months before that actually took place. And you're hearing all the calls, but see, the problem is that everybody makes that jump immediately, and that's what's created some of these wonderful short cover rallies that have been so predominant, because those that do it too soon have to be a bit more careful, because it can bounce back like that pretty hard, and that's what really propels that. It doesn't take much real strength in bull activity. And NQ, pretty ugly from that standpoint, and still a lot less attractive. It was actually improving better than the S&P was for a little bit, but these last set of readings, not so happy. We do have the same situation with midterm buyers here in the green, trying to cross above from being in that deeply depressed area. And again, I'm going to be keeping an eye on that orange from the daily, but of course we're going to see all this intraday first. So when we get to the 50K, 5K, it's going to become apparent. Euro had dipped below that 107.5 range. That was a big drop off after the ECB really signaling that they have no answers to anything, and that they're really basically on a hope and a prayer. And of course, it gets worse as the EU and NATO partners talk about banning Russian coal and all these other things. Fortunately, we're heading into summer, but it doesn't leave a lot of time to resolve some of those issues. The bigger issues are going to be the food ones that develop later in the year. And that, interestingly enough, you still have the French election coming up. And of course, everyone believes that they're assured that Macron will win. That may be so, but how strong? And will there be much of a defiance in the vote? And some of that can affect, because then they have their general elections for their parliament a little bit later on, and that could be crippling. So, this is on the heels of what we would expect to be a secondary migrant crisis after the food crisis starts to take hold, maybe towards the fall of that. But those are a bunch of bigger macro issues. In the short term, gold is going to continue its climb. No question about that. It's showing a little bit of weakness here with the weight MBI moving above magenta, but magenta is still above 33 at this particular point, and can stay that level for some time. So it's just a matter of if that dips below, we might see a little bit of a move back. But overall, it's still going to continue that general move. Oil continuing to rise. I know that they're trying, they talked about finally changing some of the lease habits. At least the Biden administration was like recognizing that they maybe need to do stuff, but a lot of that may be too late now. I mean, that needed to be done months ago, and you can't just turn on a spigot and expect oil flows to dramatically uptick. If only it were that simple, it would be that case all the time, and it's not. So, again, over that 100 is problematic in a lot of different ways. If it shoots up even further, and that depends on, if the conflict with Russia or even China starts to grow, simply because now you've had these threats made back and forth about weapons transfers. The Russians had their ship sunk, and they shot down a transport plane, and the back and forth of it. But the essential was that Russia said, look, there are unpredictable consequences if you continue with this. And that has a lot of people concerned, because what will that play out to be? Those are the surprise things that can happen in the market. What we know to be the case is this: TLT, so treasuries, down to 120 now, so way back in 150 when we kept seeing the warning signs that were building and the expectation that we were headed at least to 125. And then once we finally got there, I said that, we're looking at the 118 range to 115, and here we're at 120, and that is a massive increase in interest rates in the open market comparative to what the Fed is actually doing. So again, this is one of those things where I talk about, if the numbers for April for homes are not a blowout for sales, there's going to be a problem, because everyone's expecting increases in May of another 50 basis points. So you would think that everyone who would be buying a home in April just to beat that, because your purchasing power is going to drop dramatically on what you can afford based on that interest rate. And this doesn't look to improve anytime soon, unless you see some kind of major economic situation that suggests that the Fed's going to stop or not do that. At this particular point, we're not seeing that. Things have still been pretty decent overall. Bitcoin, we were talking about this long as I said it was holding above that 39 range here. It was doing okay. It started off all right, and sell signal came in right about there at the rose-colored dot to begin with, but you still had cyan under red, and another bar with cyan over green at that particular crossover. We still had a little bit of gold rising, and then certainly it was clear that by the time it reached the 41 there, that it was over, and sure enough, faded all the way back down to 39.8. And this is the problematic nature of what we've seen. Everyone expected Bitcoin and them to just skyrocket, and they really haven't moved much. I mean, yes, we've gotten some oscillation going in there, but you can say the same thing about the market. But I think that stability actually is more helpful. Actually, I can put up intraday of ETH, and again, mostly just straight across. Nothing of significance. We're starting up here to begin the new week here with a slight uptick from that standpoint. But overall, it hasn't been anything out of control and been easy to read. From a 50K standpoint, you can see when the sell came in from the magenta, you had the first pivot right there. It bounced above that, but immediately pivoted back down, and that was the beginning of the end for it. That's where the longs took out and started a new short, and it's continued from there. And white's still leading from a 50K standpoint, so it's not exactly a strong suit to start the week with. Intraday, this is from Thursday's action. We had some nice little pop-ups, got back up to the top, and it was just about before the market opened, and as soon as it opened, it was just selling. And that just continued, and every little pop was met with more red. Then we ended up with some builds later on for some short cover. But then the second wave of selling started, and you can just see it's a lot of white leading above, and every one of the breakdowns of magenta stayed well below the yellow throughout, and it just helps to make it easy to follow that when they remain under there, and it becomes just a follow situation at that particular point. You can see the DOC breakdown. It's a beautiful DOC spread right there. At the same time, you get that crossover with the magenta dipping below the 25 in particular, and white popping back up towards the 10. Actually, it's above that 7.5 range. It's usually pretty good. And then a 7.8, and it just carried on through all the way to the end. We're probably going to be starting up with Asia Open not too long from now, so thought I'd get this one out there for everyone. As always, though, I will put up additional details on the Skype chat. Trade well. We'll certainly be detailing all the action coming forward, so look forward to another exciting week. Trade well.